Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to Buddha Center. It's so wonderful to be with you tonight to talk about the stages of the path to enlightenment as presented by Lama Tsongkhapa, presenting exactly what Buddha Shakyamuni came to tell us, and that's exactly how we evolve into a state where we have the highest amount of happiness possible and a complete removal of suffering. So before we get started, I wanted to read some inspirational words from Lama Tsongkhapa himself. It's from the second volume of a great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. It's right at the beginning of the section on the stages of the path for persons of great capacity. And it really shows us this miraculous, this wondrous opportunity that we have and why the great vehicle teachings are so special. And we have this right in front of us. The teachings for beings of three capacities show us how to achieve that final goal of complete Buddhahood in a series of stages that are all necessary for us to engage in and practice to achieve that final goal where there's no more afflictive obstructions, no more obstructions to omniscience, which means no more suffering, and one has the highest amount of happiness possible. So the great vehicle is the only vehicle that allows one to get to that final goal of omniscience, that final goal of perfect reliability, perfect happiness, freedom from suffering, and then all of the other perfects that we talk about all the time: perfect love, power, perfect wisdom. Just all of these perfects occur by us engaging in these practices that are laid out so clearly by these enlightened masters. So here it says, the Mahayana is the origin of all the good of self and others, the medicine that alleviates all troubles, the great path traveled by all knowledgeable persons, nourishment for all beings who see, hear, remember, and come in contact with it, and that which has the great skill and means that engages you in others' welfare and thereby indirectly achieves your own welfare in its entirety. One who enters it thinks, "Wonderful, I have found what I am looking for." Let me repeat. Wonderful, I have found what I'm looking for. Enter this supreme vehicle with all of the strength of an excellent person that you have. Give it all you have, Lama Tsongkhapa says. I find this so inspiring. And this comes right after a quote from Acharya Chandragroman's letter from a student that lets us know what a person of great capacity would be like. We say the teachings for beings of three capacities, the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. If you were a great capacity practitioner, what would your mind be like? What would you think like? How would your mind be different than that of somebody who was maybe a medium scope practitioner? And here we find in Acharya Chandragroman's text, letter to a student, exactly how your mind would be. Those who seeing beings disturbed by the smoke cloud of ignorance that enshrouds the world, helplessly fallen into the blazing fire of suffering, and hastily make effort as if their own heads were on fire, are called great persons and adepts. So let's try the best we can. I know this is a big goal that we're talking about, and when we read about what it would really mean for our minds to work like that, what it would mean for our minds to have great compassion, we'll talk about that tonight. It means a really big mind that is so unbiased and moves so freely and spontaneously towards others that it's hard to believe that it's even possible. But we can use examples in our everyday life that show how glimpses of it are possible when we look at the relationship of a mother with a child and father with a child, etc., etc. So we can come up with some examples to see how from those examples we could build upon them to go from an inflicted type of compassion where there's attachment involved to a completely non-afflicted compassion that's lacking that attachment, but just has this desire for sentient beings to have freedom from suffering, just as a mother would her only child, without the presence of any affliction, without the presence of any attachment. So this is a big, big, huge mind when we look at the object of observation of that mind as all sentient beings, without any kind of bias, every single sentient being in the universe. So this is a big mind, this is a big goal, but the only way we get to big goals is by producing the results, by producing the causes to get to the results of big goals, by producing the causes that serve as the mental basis for the arisal for the mind that aspires to enlightenment, by acquainting our mind with the things that we need to acquaint it with in order for us to be able to generate such a beautiful mind, acquainting it with the excellent qualities of a Buddha, and knowing what a Buddha is, and knowing that a Buddha is a being who's been freed by a practice, separated from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, knowing that we are looking to become a being who has this state. Knowing what this kind of being is a necessary step. Knowing what this kind of being is and being inspired by this being is a necessary step. And then aspiring to be a being like this is a necessary step. Aspiring to be kind of like a being like this. Aspiring to be just like a being like this. These are all stages that our mind goes through, and it has to go through it in a process where we recognize what the problem is completely, what the thing that sentient beings don't have, they're bereft of happiness, and they don't have happiness, they're bereft of happiness, and they have suffering. We have to really identify what that means in a complete way. And in order for us to identify that in a complete way, we identify it from our own side. So we talked about that last week. So there's a lot of work that we have to do if we want to actually generate this mind, if we want to become a Mahayana practitioner, if we want to become a great scope practitioner, the entrance to the Mahayana, the entrance to the great scope. It's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. We're talking about bodhicitta. So tonight, let's begin by setting a motivation in a contrived way, in a faked way. And if you're like me, I'm not a bodhisattva. I'm working on becoming a bodhisattva. I know I can become a bodhisattva because there's practices very clearly written, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing the exchanging self with others practices. These practices are there for me to be able to achieve this mind that aspires to enlightenment. And every single Buddha relied upon these practices to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and relied upon that mind that aspires to enlightenment to push them forward through the bodhisattva practices to become Buddhas. We know that we have exactly what the recipe that these great beings had. We know we even have like special parts, little instructions by these Kadampa masters, by the Tibetan masters, these special kind of instructions written in the recipe. Some recipes just have ingredients. We have the recipe with all these special instructions that are written in it, like, oh, make sure that you don't get it, too hot, or make sure it doesn't get too cool. It needs to be right at this temperature. Make sure that the onions are this exact color to extract the flavor. If they get too brown, it'll be bitter. We have all of these special oral instructions, from all of these Panchen Lamas and the incredible Dalai Lamas in our world to be able to know how to cook up our own bodhicitta. And we're so fortunate to have this. And I really, really mean it when I say that. It's something that I've seen in front of my eyes now multiple times, beings who've worked on this and clearly identify with the world and others in a different way than I do, in such a completely different way that they stand out in a crowd. Beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche. We see these beings and they're clearly different than us. And what the difference is that they've worked on their minds in the way that they're begging us to do. So nothing great comes from little causes. So we have to create a ton of little causes that all build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, and then make our mind eventually have this main mind called Bodhicitta, the result of the 7-point cause and effect of realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment that we've been talking about so much. So in whatever way you can, say, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, and set the motivation. The motivation is so important at the beginning of the teaching, so we really get our minds right. We're here for what reason? To become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm not here for any other reason because I want to achieve my own goals and all sentient beings' goals. I want to be the best that I can, and the only way I can do that is by becoming a Buddha. And that best that I can be, attainment, will allow me to really, really know how to be the cause of bringing sentient beings who are bereft of happiness to happiness, and how to be the cause of showing sentient beings who have suffering how to remove their suffering. So we do things like we say, hey, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, because we're leaving imprints in our mind that tally with our goal of bodhicitta, that tally with it. So our mind flows easier towards it. So it isn't such a turn when we start to sit in our practice. If we every day keep doing this, every time we see a sentient being, we say, may I become a Buddha for your sake. May I become a Buddha for your sake. The more we do this, we're acquainting our mind with it and getting our mind to flow towards others and flow towards all others instead of flowing only towards some, and flowing with that flow, having an attachment mixed in with it and an affliction mixed in with it. So we're trying for our minds to flow towards all of these beings without the attachment that we usually need to have present for us to flow towards beings. So we're working on this with so many different angles, the same way that we work at trying to realize emptiness with so many different angles. So, hey, say to yourself, why am I here tonight? Why did I enter into the Buddhist practices? I had so many questions that I couldn't answer. I saw so many people suffering around me. I was, as a child, saw all the suffering in Africa going on the TV, children with flies on them. I really wanted to understand why this was, why I suffered, why so many things that happened in my life were so difficult, but not difficult when I compared it to other people who had really, really difficult times. And Buddhism gave me answers, and gave me not only answers to the whys, but the how to fix this thing that really disgusted me and scared me so much. Really, really, this scares me so much. How to fix this thing that scares me so much. It scares me to see others who are in such a state of suffering. I have to look away. How could I have the courage to look and then move towards them? We build up our courage through this practice. We build up our courage through daily saying, I want to be able to eventually have the patience to endure the hardships of a bodhisattva for you and you and you and you and you. And we expand that you and make it more and more and more and more beings. So we say we're here for the sake of all sentient beings. And in order to have some inspiration, some role models, beings we can say, oh, I aspire to be like you, and I'm inspired by you, and I know it's possible for me to become like you because I have the practices that you practiced. To be able to envision those beings who you consider holy beings in the space in front of you will give you more courage to be able to do your practice and give you more blessings to be able to transform your magnificent potential. That's what blessing means. In English, shila, we say blessing, but it means transforming your magnificent potential. That potential is within you and within me. We have to discover it. We have to increase what we already have and discover that we can be better and better and better and better and better. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to have this discovery, and we have these beings in the front of us who've discovered it. We need to have teachers. The source of all of our good, the foundation of all of our good qualities is our teacher. And when we start with that in our practice, we have a solid foundation in front of us that we know won't steer us wrong. We know that these beings in front of us have only come into this world to help. Enthused by great compassion, enthused by altruism, they come to help us, just as Buddha Shakyamuni did, as Acharya Dignaga says in the words of homage in the Pramana Samuccaya. We're really fortunate to have these incredible texts. So imagining the merit field and the space in front of you, all the holy enlightened beings, whoever you connect with, whether it's just one being, Buddha Shakyamuni, or Buddha Shakyamuni and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the manifestation of Chen Rezig, imagining your root lamas, the extensive deeds lineage, the profound view lineage, the lineage of blessings, the old Kadampa masters, all of the Nyingma Kagyu Sakya Galupa masters, Butong masters, Jonang masters, all of the masters of the Pali tradition, Theravadan tradition, all of the masters of the Dharmagupta tradition and the Mulasavastavadi tradition, the Pali tradition, the Sanskrit tradition, all of these beings in the space in front of us, these holy enlightened masters, masters of the four classes of Tantra, deities of the four classes of Tantra, 35 Buddhas, all the protector deities. Imagine these beings that just give us so much power. Now you said, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. The only way that sentient beings become Buddhas is by discovering the truth of suchness. The only thing that Buddhas do for sentient beings is teach them how to discover the truth of suchness. So what Buddhas will do eventually, what we will do eventually when we become a Buddha, is emanate bodies because of our great compassion and our omniscient mind that knows where these beings are located to help them. And the only way we can help them is to help them evolve to eventually realize the truth of suchness, realize bodhicitta for themselves, learn what the instructions are to realize emptiness, realize bodhicitta, the ripening paths, the liberating paths. So we're imagining that we're able to do that because this is the goal that we want to have. So we're getting familiar, we're getting comfortable with moving our minds out to all sentient beings, because the more comfortable we get with something, the easier it becomes. And then it'll just basically be the way that our mind works when we create enough of these foundational practices for it to be that way that our mind works, and remove the things that keep our mind from working like that, and remove the things that keep our mind from being able to have this perfect love and compassion, perfect power, skillful means, perfect wisdom, a perfect realization and understanding of reality and diversity, and the perfect caring for others. These things are built with these tiny little Legos of practice like we're doing right now, and eventually we have this thing that's built called the Buddha. We build ourselves into this stupa by removing all of the unstupa-like things from us, and we eventually arrive at this place where everything unstupa-like has been removed, and we're a beautiful stupa, we're a Buddha. So imagine that we're doing things like Buddhas do, that we're imagining that we can send ourselves out to all sentient beings and invite them here to be our guests, invite them here to hear these teachings, and imagine that these teachings are transformed into their own individual language. Imagine that they're transformed into the language of gods, humans, and gods, nagas and yaksas, and the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be. I shall proclaim the language, the Dharma, in the language of all. Now imagine that you're able to invite sentient beings in their languages, and that they're coming here to be able to hear a teaching in their own language, at their own aptitude, and know that you've invited them somewhere to hear the teachings for beings of three capacities, which contain everything that a sentient being needs to know in order to become a Buddha. So you've invited them to a reliable place. So you imagine that you invite them according to the way that we've practiced, inviting those who are closest to you, your mothers, your brothers, your father, your sister, your uncle, these people you feel close to, and then strangers, and then difficult people, and then filling in all of the other sentient beings, hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods, imagining that you're bringing all sentient beings here to be your guest so that they can hear the truth of suchness. Just like when you become a Buddha, you will meet with them in various ways and emanate to them in order to help them. And as a special intention this evening, we received news just before the teaching that Lama Sutramalion is going in tomorrow for a cancer removal. So if we could all keep her in our prayers. She's such an important lineage holder in the Kagyu and the Dzogchen tradition, and considered an emanation of Machi Ladron, and a holder of that lineage, a very important holder of that lineage, and someone who, as what changed in Tibet, what changed Tibet was when they stopped needing to rely upon Indian masters to see realizations. What happened in Tibet is that the Tibetans started to have realizations. These great Mahasiddhis had realizations and created lineages. And this is what began to make Tibet its own special place that kept the Dharma so sacred and pure. And it's people, beings like Lama Sutra Malion and Venerable Thupten Chodron, who are trailblazers, who are the trailblazers that blaze these trails, that allow us to start to see how the Dharma really is starting to mature in our culture, in the West. We say the West, it's not a great way to say it, but, mature in our culture. And the sign of it maturing is that realizations are being produced, lineages are being held by participants within that culture that then can be lineage transfers and practice transfers, if you will, saying it in a loose way. So going in for cancer surgery tomorrow, so please keep her in your prayers. And when we're thinking of all sentient beings, thinking of realized beings, you can think of me, call me into the with everybody else and say, hey, he needs some teachings. I'm hesitant to say, hey, beings who are emanations, considered emanations in other lineages, to invite them. But we really need to look at it from the perspective of, one of her students called me, and we need to make sure that our karma is pure in order to not lose if I can't see who's a Buddha and not a Buddha. But if she is a Buddha, we have to make sure our mind is pure and that we engage in practices in order to make sure that the mirror for the reflection of the Buddha, or the body of water, needs to be there for the moon to reflect. We need to make sure that we create the causes and conditions to keep beings like this in our world. So we, make prayers, but also should recognize if there are root lama, that we need to kind of look at it in a little bit of a different way as to not, depending on how we see our teachers. So I'll just leave it at there. Lama Sutra Malion is not my teacher, but I have a great amount of respect for, and some of my students and some of Rinpoche's students are root students of hers. So because we're all Dharma family, I felt it very important to mention. All sentient beings are here. All the enlightened beings are here. So every kind of being in the universe now is here. And imagine that all the sentient beings that you've invited here are now experiencing the immense love and compassion that is in front of them, that is the merit field, that the manifestation of just this wisdom, love, and compassion. And as I said before, these beings that I've come in contact with that are so different, as soon as you look in their eyes, there's almost a feeling of chills or a feeling of love you've never had before when you get in any kind of proximity of them. So just imagine that these other sentient beings are with you and experiencing the magnificent, the wonder of that. Whatever that is when you get, very close within the proximity of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, mostly no matter who you are, tears start to fall. And many scientists, many people who have can't explain, they're not Buddhists, why this is occurring, why this happens, state that this is testimonials that this just happens. It's because of the love and compassion that this being has that's just so different. And we will become like that if we put in the work to become just like that. Imagine that the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha of Ultra Peak Mountain, second turning of the Wheel of Dharma, where the definitive truth of the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena was taught, while harmonizing the fact that things exist. Things don't intrinsically exist, but things exist through dependent origination. So we have to be able to, if we're thinking that we have any idea of what Buddha Shakyamuni came to talk to us about when he said things are empty of intrinsic existence, we have to be able to first start by saying that the Buddha didn't come to teach us that things don't exist. The Buddha came to teach us that there's a mode of existence that we've never even thought of, that if we did know, we would be less screwed up. And then eventually not screwed up at all once we know the mode of existence enough times over and over and over again to be able to influence our mind enough to be able to stop adhering to things as having this intrinsic existence in terms of apprehension in a complete way. So it's important for us to look at what the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge came to tell us about and find out if we think that the Buddha came to tell us that things don't exist at all, if we think that Buddha came to tell us that there's no person at all, then we're highly mistaken about what the Heart Sutra means. If we think that the Buddha says there's no self and that the object of negation, when we look at what's the object of negation, when we look at what are we looking to get, negate. If we think that when we look at a flower, the object of negation is flower, then we're missing what the Buddha came to say. If we think when we say, what is the object of negation of self, if we say it's self, then we've missing what the Buddha came to say. Because no self means no intrinsically existent self. It doesn't mean no self that exists. There is a self that exists, it just doesn't intrinsically exist. And we find out it doesn't intrinsically exist by engaging in ultimate analysis. And the forms and the feelings and the perceptions and formations, all of these things, Four Noble Truths, all of these things that are saying there is no before before the object, no eye, no ear, no nose. You have to have in parentheses, no intrinsically existent eye, ear, nose. Because the object of negation isn't, the object of negation when we look at it in relation to eyes and ears and noses, the object of negation isn't eyes, ears, and noses. It's a specific kind of eyes, ears, and noses. It's intrinsically existent eyes, ears, and noses. Eyes, ears, and noses that exist from their own side, independent of mere imputation. Independent of mere imputation and dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation. So this is what the Heart Sutra is talking about. It could be really easy if the Buddha just said, there's no self here, don't worry. Don't worry, there's no self. Don't worry about suffering because there's no self to suffer. If the Buddha just meant there's no one here, then who's talking to you? Whose experience, who wants happiness and doesn't want suffering? Who will help sentient beings to achieve enlightenment if the Buddha doesn't have a self at all? If there's no self, if there's no, a dual, if there's not me here and then Buddha over there, and then if the Buddha isn't dualistically cognizing me conventionally as separate from him, why would the Buddha come to move to help me? There'd be no one to come help. Because the Buddha would know there's no one here. There's no one to help. So the no one to help, there's no intrinsic person to help, but there's a subjective person to help. So these are the things that we need to sort out. And we're not going to go into what ultimate analysis is and conventional analysis is. But the main thing that I want before I read this for you to know is that things exist. They don't exist the way that I think that they do. And there's a whole lot of information out there to help me learn what the actual mode of existence is, which is dependent origination. And that dependent origination, that mode of existence of dependent origination, is the reason that things don't inherently exist. So this dependent origination exists. And this dependent origination is used as the reason to prove that things don't intrinsically exist. This is the king of reasonings. The subject pot is not inherently existent because it dependently originates. It dependently originates from causes and conditions. It dependently originates in terms of wholes and parts. And then the most subtle, the real dependent origination that the Buddha came to talk to us about, the thing you must know to understand emptiness, is the dependent origination of mere imputation, mere labeling, in dependence upon a collection, parts, wholes and parts and causes and conditions that serve as a basis of designation for this or that. Just this mere imputation and dependence upon a collection. And that collection, that basis of designation, isn't the real designated object. Wow. If we only could sort that out, the Buddha says that all of our troubles would be freed up. If we could start to see that these things we crave so badly are just fabrications of our mind. They're like a dream. They're not a dream. Things exist externally. It's not my imagination. But I'm imagining a way about the things that exist externally that makes me crazy. Because it's insane. I believe something exists that doesn't exist. We call that crazy, right? When you believe in things that don't exist to exist. I see things that exist that don't. What do we call that in our society? We would call that crazy. We'd call that like schizophrenic. We would say that somebody who sees things that don't exist to exist, that person has a problem. Well, that's what the Buddha said. We're ill. See that the Buddha is like a doctor and we're like a patient. Why are we ill? Because we grasp at things as being intrinsically existent when they don't. We see something that exists within an object that doesn't exist. And that belief that things exist in a concrete way makes us crazy. It is crazy. And it makes us crazier because then we think that that concrete thing over there has concrete attractiveness and concrete ugliness. And we just keep building and building on this wrong foundation. Oh, this thing's intrinsically existent. Oh, look at that thing over there. It's intrinsically attractive. Oh, intrinsically attractive things I'm attached to. Let me have it. Can you see how this Heart Sutra could undo that? If we could see the emptiness of intrinsic existence, that things were merely subjective, mere imputation and dependence upon a collection, serving as a basis of designation. Some wholes and parts and stuff that I name and believe exist from their own side as the thing I'm naming it. But the thing I'm naming it, the designated object and the basis of designation are mutually exclusive. I don't believe that, though. I think that that chair exists right within the chair. I say chair, and it's right inside that chair over there. Concretely, it appears from its own side. And even modern physics would say that that's not true. But we have to put this into practice and see how this affects our mind. Just because you understand all of this, or you understand that modern physics says that the object's not coming from its own side, that doesn't mean that it's going to change your mind. We have to practice. Today in the teaching, and the last three teaching, the most venerable Geshe, Pema Dorje La was saying, quoting Jetsun Milarepa and saying, seeing food is not enough. You have to eat it. Hearing the Dharma is not enough. You have to practice it. This is such important basic advice. Seeing food is not enough. You have to eat it. Hearing the Dharma is not enough. You have to practice it. You have to see what the ramifications are to you thinking in wrong ways. What are the ramifications? If I think in wrong ways, what are the ramifications? Well, then I have a disturbed state of mind, because an affliction is a mental factor, the presence of which is disturbing to my mind. Okay. So that's definitely a problem. I don't want my mind disturbed. And we have to start tracing it back. My mind gets disturbed when I'm attached. Well, why do I become attached? Because I have inappropriate attention. Because I think things are intrinsically pretty or intrinsically awful. Why? Because I think they intrinsically exist, and then they're suitable to be something that would be like that. And if I can get rid of this false notion that things intrinsically exist, the whole thing collapses, because it's built upon a faulty foundation. this whole way of being that disturbs me so much goes away. So if self-grasping ignorance goes away, what happens? Suffering is ended. Suffering never occurs again if you get rid of self-grasping ignorance completely. Those are the afflictive obstructions. If you get rid of self-grasping ignorance completely at its root, there's no more afflictive obstructions. Afflictive obstructions bind you to samsara. Those are the stakes. Do you want to suffer or not? If you don't want to suffer, the only way, forget about Buddhahood, just not suffering ever again, like here a solitary realizer foe destroyer. If you don't want to suffer ever again, you have to see emptiness. There's no choice. You will suffer again. You could do everything in the world, be the most compassionate, loving, greatest person in the world, get to the calmest state of mind, the peak of existence in concentration, but you will suffer again. You will cycle in cyclic existence and suffer again if you don't remove the self-grasping ignorance. In the peak of existence, those beings are under the influence of the afflictions because they have self-grasping ignorance, and they will have to be born again. Even though they have all these great qualities that I couldn't even imagine having. So we've got to get this right, and the way to get this right is to make sure that we understand what the object of negation is, and that's intrinsic existence, an intrinsically existent I and mine, intrinsically existent stuff other than person me and person you, etc., etc. So we have to, if we wish to not suffer, according to Lord Buddha, understand what the beginning of the 12 links of dependent origination is, and how it sets it forth. And we know it's that ignorance of cause and effect, karma and its results, and ignorance about the nature of reality. And the ignorance of the nature of reality is the root of all of the mess. And the ignorance about the nature of reality is reversed by looking at its opposite, and that is the nature of reality is the objective existence. The objectivity of things is the emptiness of objective existence. We see that the mode of existence of things is emptiness of intrinsic existence, is subjective existence. And hidden in this sutra is also the teaching on the 5 paths of accumulation, Mahayana paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. And we'll learn more about what that means in the future. We're so fortunate. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. So again, imagining you're in Rajagriha and all sentient beings are reciting this along with you, and that Buddha Shakyamuni and Lord Chenrezig and Venerable Shariputra are all here, surrounded by the Buddha, other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. All these beings are here, and the perfection of wisdom is being taught. And you can also imagine that on all these places, the perfection of wisdom in the 100,000 verse, the 20,000 verse, 8,000 verse, and then there's some real sharp beings that hear just and recognize that that's the negation of inherent existence, the negative in Sanskrit. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once, the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. Saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness, thus Shariputra. All dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu, no mind dhatu, no dhatu dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, Cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son, noble family, thus it is, O son, noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Aga samara jajandara samara yave de adon kate kate parakate parasankate buddhizo ha baba ganja sanji gai dembe doji she loba doji meba doji shiva doji dragi baji meta beje danji jedin goriye so ha gerenjo jaji joshua da midon beje nandro da tumba janjin bonzon zonjoji daji de dananda de le jo. Zaji buji juji me to tra ri ra li ji ni de jen ba de zang je shin de mi de a ji zhe zhang nan da xin la zhe ba shi jie zhen la ma dang ba jie nan ji jie jie jia la jian zai jian zhen ji jie da zang bei de jie zhen ma la za jie 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 jia ba ba de zi. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Edangara Radha Mandala Ganirata Yami Sanje Jadan Zaji Jadan La Janju Vada Dani Jasuji Dagi Jishi Jibe Sonanji Jala Benji Sanje Jubasho Sanje Jadan Zaji Jadan La Janju Vada Dani Jasuji Dagi Jishi Jibe Sonanji Jala Benji Sanje Jubasho Sanje Jadan Zaji Jadan La Janju Vada Dani Jasuji Dagi Jishi Jibe Sonanji Jala Benji Sanje Jubasho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And now we'll recite the source of all my good. This is what foundation of all good qualities, the short 14 stanza poem by Lama Tsongkhapa that we've been studying now for many years. It encompasses everything in 14 stanzas that the Buddha taught that's necessary for someone to go from wherever he or she is at in terms of spiritual realization to complete Buddhahood. To complete removal of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So this is a roadmap that tells us exactly what one needs to do going through. If we look at Pabonka Rinpoche's precious outline, we see starting from the recognition of how to find a teacher and rely on a teacher, and then moving on to what you do once you've found a teacher, how to take the essence of this life and engage in the practices for beings of 3 capacities. And then an aspiration to be able to, have no obstacles and, and having all of, your companions to live long and fruitful lives any obstacles to the Dharma being removed, and then a final dedication. These four categories. The final dedication that in all our lives we're never separated from our teachers, and that we could be able to achieve the final, all of the grounds and paths, and achieve the state of Vajradhara ourselves. So we see these four sections, and it goes through it in this order, where it goes from the teacher to the, begging us to actually do something with this good life of leisure and opportunity, to the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, the teachings for beings of great capacity of the perfection vehicle, and then the teachings for beings of great capacity in the resultant vehicle, the tantric vehicle. So the Mahayana is divided into perfection vehicle and tantra vehicle. So it goes through all of the stages up to the tantric vehicle, which we know we'll need in order to engage in the final completion stage practices to achieve complete Buddhahood. We'll need that. So Lama Tsongkhapa takes us from the beginning stages of a spiritual practice all the way to the final end, and then prayers to make sure that we're able to get the job done, basically. The source of all my good. The source of all my good is by Lama Tsongkhapa. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and help me serve to follow him with all my strength and reverence. So here, this is how to take yourself and to rely on a teacher, how to rely on him or her. And then here is where, once you have a teacher, where we then move on to this kind of Lama Tsongkhapa begging us, please take advantage of this life of leisure and opportunity. And the way you'll do it is by practicing the teachings for beings of three capacities. So this is a request, a begging us, please, this life you have is so valuable. You can practice these teachings for beings of three capacities. Lama Tsongkhapa points that out after leisure and opportunity. It points out this section on the three scopes. This is what you can do with this leisure and opportunity. So here there's it's a beseeching us, begging us to please take advantage of this thing that you have. So this is then, it says, bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. I need to really just get it into my mind that this life of leisure is so, so important, because I can practice the Dharma. I can become a Buddha with it. Do the things that are needed to become a Buddha with it. Don't use it for stuff that makes you unhappy. Use it for stuff that will make you happy, that will make you eternally happy. Use it for things that will make you never suffer again, as opposed to using it for things that make you suffer again and make you unhappy. So Lama Tsongkhapa is begging us, please use this thing for things that will make you never suffer again and that will make you happy, instead of the opposite that you always do. You always do the opposite of this, kid. Lama Tsongkhapa is saying you're always doing the opposite of what will, cause you to have what you want. You're doing the opposite. You have to do something else if you want these things you say you want, of happiness and no suffering. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. Now we get into the small scope. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then to stop, ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So here, this is how a practitioner who doesn't want to be born into the lower realms of cyclic existence doesn't, engage. This is how a practitioner who wants to not be born in the lower realms of cyclic existence keeps it from happening. By engaging in going for refuge, and engaging in the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and acknowledging one's downfalls if one engages in negativities by applying the 4 opponent powers. So here, the small scope shows us what we do day and night in order to not have a rebirth in the lower realms of cyclic existence. And now we get into and this is called the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. Now we get into the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. Here we recognize that all of the realms of cyclic existence, not only the lower realms of cyclic existence, are realms that we must get rid of. We don't want to be born into. So here, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity show us how not to be born in cyclic existence at all by practicing the three highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, by renouncing cyclic existence, by blessing me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom, or for liberation. Grant me that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality, or the individual liberation, the pradamoksha vows, the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. So we see the Vinaya, the pradamoksha vows, the 7 types of lifetime liberation vows, or the 8 types of individual liberation vows, if we add the 24-hour vows. So we see that morality is the foundation of Buddha's teaching, whether it's, if we're looking at the individual liberation vehicle, or if we're looking at the great vehicle in terms of the Bodhisattva yana, or in terms of the perfection vehicle, or if we're looking at it in terms of the Vajratantric vehicle, ethics is the foundation of all of it. So we see that these building blocks of practice from the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity and the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity are essential, indispensable realizations to have in order to move forward, in order to, be able to have the foundations for the latter realizations. Now we get into the teachings for beings of great capacity that rely on the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Aspiring Bodhicitta, grant me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows, and this is engaged Bodhicitta. So now we're studying right now the aspiring Bodhicitta, how to get it. And we're studying the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. The precept and then the 6 causes for realizing the result of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, the entrance to the Mahayana. And then the next is then there's this aspiring bodhicitta, and then we'll learn what the difference is between aspiring and engaged bodhicitta later. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. This stanza must be done for the individual liberation practitioner also. Individual liberation practitioner must realize emptiness directly in order for them to achieve an abiding nirvana. There's no different emptiness to realize in the different vehicles. It's the same emptiness that must be realized. But here in this case, when we look at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa says in the text in the medium scope, he's not going to get into the details of the special insight and concentration right there, because he deals with it in the great scope section. But mark it in your mind that this path where quietude and insight joins together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, and the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way, this must be realized by the individual liberation practitioner, by a hearer or a solitary realizer. They both must realize emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena. They must realize through a union of calm abiding and special insight, they must realize emptiness in an inferential way and then directly perceive it the same way that a bodhisattva has to. They use less reasonings and so forth, but they realize the same emptiness. Just don't use as many reasonings and delve into it in such a multifaceted way that makes them into the most reliable guide in the universe. We'll leave it at that. So here, just know that this stanza applies. You can plug it in if you just decide, if one were to say, oh, I'm just going to practice the Hira Solitary Realizer to achieve an abiding nirvana, this stanza needs to be placed with the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. Then we get into Tantra. So it says, now, grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that's worthy. You are not a worthy vestibule if you haven't practiced the paths that are shared. People think they can just, oh, I'm going to be a Vajrayana practitioner. I don't need any of these things. I just need to make 100,000 prostrations. I don't need to know anything else. Just somehow magically I'll be a Vajrayana practitioner. But Lama Tsongkhapa is so kind to show us, don't be self-deceptive. Don't lie to yourself, because lying to yourself will just keep you in samsara. The point of you being here, the point of putting all this hard effort and time is to have something actually happen. Imagine if you put all your hard effort in, got all A's in the school, and you did everything that you thought you did, but just missed one thing. And there's like, you got to the graduation, they were like, sorry, you don't get your diploma. What a letdown. You do all this work, and sorry, you don't get your goals. What a letdown. Why? Because you're practicing something that you're not worthy of practicing. You're not a vessel that's worthy, because you haven't created the foundations that are necessary for it to actually work. Self-deception is rampant, especially in the West. I'm a tantric practitioner, and channels, winds and drops, and all this, tile, all this stuff that people love talking about, but can't even begin to explain the Four Noble Truths, can't even begin to engage in the individual liberation, abstention from the general practices of abstaining from the 10 non-virtues activities, let alone having a foundation of among the 7 types of individual lifetime, individual liberation vows that Lord Atisha, right in the lamp for the path to enlightenment, held as a foundation for all the lineages in terms of Lam Rim, and referenced it by all the lineages in terms of Lam Rim, saying that the most ideal person for the Bodhisattva vows is someone who holds those Pratamoksha vows, the ideal candidate. Oh, almost makes it like a prerequisite in writing. It's not, because you can get bodhicitta obviously without individual liberation vows, long story, but writes it with a firm understanding that the most ideal candidate for a bodhisattva vow is a fully ordained person. And the person who practices tantra is a bodhisattva. Once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good, those who are ethical. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them just like my life. Care about it as much as my life. It says even at the cost of my life, but hold my vows like as important as I hold my life. Keeping clean, pure ethics as important as I hold my life. Keeping as again Jeffrey Hopkins said, that, during these degenerate times, everyone loves Tantra, but Tantra is not for the degenerate. We have to use this as personal instruction. Bless me to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times, highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. Jewa gondo yanda lama dan, drelme chuji pela lonju shing, sadan lanji yunten razo ne, dorji changi gopan yordu sho. So fortunate to have these texts in our world. So we've been talking about aspiring bodhicitta. We don't have tons of time left. That's okay. We'll do the best we can to get in a little bit of information about great compassion or cultivation of compassion. So we learned a couple of things last week. We learned that when we're working on compassion, we're establishing the object of compassion as sentient beings who are experiencing among the 3 types of suffering. That's the object of our compassion. And then we also learned that the subjective aspect is thinking how nice it would be if they were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I will cause them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So this idea that I will cause them to be is a difference here between the Mahayana and the individual liberation vehicle. In the individual liberation vehicle, the here solitary realizer vehicle or Hinayana vehicle, we'll use that term. I don't feel it's derogatory. I feel it's explanatory. In the Hinayana vehicle, we have this idea of may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. But this idea that I will cause it is something that's unique to the Mahayana, and that I will cause it turns into altruism, which turns into bodhicitta. So this is something that's very different, loaded within the compassion, the great compassion that we speak of in the Mahayana, that's different than the immeasurable compassion that we find in the individual liberation vehicle, the Hinayana vehicle. It's just not the same compassion. The object, sentient beings that are suffering, is the same, but the actual subjective aspect of thinking, I will cause them to not suffer, I will cause them to be happy, isn't there. So this is the little bit of a difference, and this is why it becomes a great vehicle. The greatness is that the mind is this foundation of altruism that isn't just thinking, oh, may they be happy, but I'm going to be the one that really makes sure that I achieve liberation. Whereas the difference and that's in the Hinayana, in the great vehicle, we're saying like, I'll be the cause of them to be happy, and I'm going to become a Buddha for that reason. A little different, and then I'll make sure that they are. I'm not going to just be satisfied abiding in a state of peace, an extreme of peace. I'm going to make sure everybody else is okay. So we learn that when we do these practices where we start to look at these sentient beings who are suffering, we use actual sentient beings. We use our actual mother, brother, sister, uncle, roommate, father, all of these beings. We use real ones, not fake beings. We use real ones so that we can have an experience. We use real strangers so that we can have an experience, Kamala Shila is saying. We use real enemies, real difficult people, so that we can have an experience. And then we fill in the rest of sentient beings around us. So think about this. If we're imagining these beings and we get out of our way, these people we're attached to, and we move over to strangers, and we think of these beings that we know they're in the supermarket working. I go to the supermarket a lot. This is really the only place I go. So I'm always talking about the supermarket. But, Lori and I for about 5 years have really been in-house and practicing. And because Rinpoche, Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche lived here and we took care of him, and then Lori's been so sick. And we've really gone out for doctor's appointments and a couple of other, maybe less than 5 events. And then I go to the grocery store. So this is one of my stomping grounds of where I meet people to work with, because we're doing our practice with real beings. So what's interesting, if you do this practice and you go to places where there's strangers, and then in the mornings and different times, you invite all sentient beings to be your guests, and you're imagining strangers. What's interesting is if that same day you then go to the supermarket and you see those strangers, they don't feel as strangery. It's very, very different. And you'll see your mind doing it if you do this practice, if you actually work on these things. When you work on these things, even with like friends that are like kind of friends, those kind of friends. And then you run into that kind of friend. And if you did the practice in the morning, or been doing the practice regularly, you're like thinking to yourself like, oh, it was nice to see you this morning at the gathering that really mattered. The place that usually we've gone as friends together to places that just don't matter, that just don't mean anything. But, I've connected with you in a way now that I'm seeing you as so much more charged in terms of my affection for you. So much more charged, such a different feeling as I'm seeing like people walking on the street, even ones that, I didn't even necessarily, maybe I judged before, seeing them walking on the street and feeling a different way about them because I've become acquainted with them as having been my mother. So you start to be able to, it's a big realization to say, hello, mother, or, oh, hi, mom, I've forgotten. That's a big realization. But to start to see how the affection draws closer and closer and closer to beings, when you do this practice, you will see. When you do this practice and you have these enemies, these arch rivals that come up on the TV or in your life that bother you so much, if you did your practice in the morning first, and then you think about these beings, and you invite difficult beings, and you say that you being a horrible person is not an excuse for me not to love, you being a horrible person is not an excuse for me not to have compassion. Hold on. Objects that are the same shape. Oh, dear. Okay. So it's not an excuse. So when you're doing this practice, this meditation, where you're trying to get affection for all beings, friends, enemies, and neutrals, if you do this enough and then you turn your TV on and you see that being, hopefully your reaction won't be as turbulent. And then eventually it will be, that person is suffering. That person wants happiness. That person was my relative. And it's this person is awful, disgusting person, and they should blah, blah, blah. And I hope that chatter gets replaced with, it may start as, that person's a horrible person. Ninji, compassion. They're suffering. They want happiness. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And you're thinking of things that are the opposite of the inappropriate attention that you're normally doing. Because you have created tools in your mind to combat your crappy states of mind that make you sad, worry, and feel awful over and over and over and over and over again. And you think that this courageous anger at the enemies is really what would just, if they could just get rid of that one, then everybody would just be so happy. You know, sometimes the people that we hate so much are just doing the things out in the open. And the people we think are so great are just doing things behind closed doors. And they're all suffering in the same way. Every single one of them. Anger, attachment, the presence of which disturbs our mind. So important. And then we looked at the various types of suffering, and we'll end here. We just looked at the Lam Rim, how we have to cultivate all the stages. And where we left off last week was looking at that. Lama Tsongkhapa says, hey, your mothers are experiencing suffering. Well, you know all about that because you have renunciation. You have meditated on the 3 sufferings, the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings. You've meditated on the general sufferings of samsara and the medium scope, where you find the 8, 6, and 3 sufferings, and you've meditated on the specific types of suffering in the small and medium scope related to the lower realms and the higher realms. Or, as we find in Arya Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, the 6 types of suffering, and then the specific types of suffering, the 5 realms, where he combines the gods and demigods realm. So we have to know what suffering is. It says, beings like myself have fallen into the sea of this suffering life, just like me. I have to know, like me. What do you mean? I have to know what suffering they've fallen into. And I have to think about every type of suffering that there is in the universe. So when I'm confronted with it, I don't, like when somebody sees blood, runs away. I want to be the one that sees blood and gets courage. I see a suffering, burning being. I want to have courage to jump in the fire and help them. So different. I have to become acquainted with the various types of suffering and so forth. It says, Lama Tsongkhapa says, I've explained this in the teachings for beings of medium capacity. You'll assess your own situation. And once you do, that assessment of your own situation allows you to cultivate compassion for others. And when you assess your own situation and you combine it with this practice of seeing sentient beings as your mother, establishing this basis for wanting to be intent on others' welfare, this basis where you become to see beings as lovable, that once you know what suffering is and generate this, you will naturally be compassionate. Wow. It says that right here. It says you assess your own situation and then you cultivate compassion towards others. If you follow this method, you will easily generate compassion. Considering your own suffering creates the determination to be free. Renunciation. Thinking about others' suffering creates compassion. However, if you do not first consider your own suffering, you will not reach the key point of practice. I'm glad we're doing this right. And when I say doing this right, not being satisfied with partial instructions and seeing exactly what did the Buddha say? What did the Nalanda Pandits say? What did these 4 lineages say? What did some of them say that don't make sense? What did some of them say that do make sense? Everybody didn't get it right. Everybody doesn't get a trophy. The people who get a trophy figure out what the object of negation is, and they generate bodhicitta. They see emptiness as bodhisattvas, go through the path of seeing to the path of meditation and all of the 10 bodhisattva grounds and reach the resultant ground of perfect Buddhahood. Those are the people who I am looking towards for guidance. Those people who got it right. Because many didn't. And many people will sit in caves and meditate on the wrong object of negation and feel that the object of negation somehow becomes this affirming negative that affirms something else in its place. That's something even better than emptiness. And that just reifies this mode of existence the Buddha came to tell us isn't true. It's not true. This special mind that you see emptiness and then you realize the special mind realizing it, and that special mind's really the special thing. That's just reification of this special thing that I'm just going to chill out in and think that I have a realization. If I don't see that special thing as empty of intrinsic existence, that special illumination, empty of intrinsic existence, that awareness of awareness being empty of intrinsic existence, I'm in trouble because I haven't identified the object of negation, and I'm going to see something as intrinsically existent, and that causes me to circle in cyclic existence. So they say. I haven't realized emptiness, but I'm relying on authentic commentaries and the Nalanda pendants to guide me. And I'm guiding you with this information. I'm not trying to say I have these realizations. I'm trying to say that I've heard this information accurately and analyzed it, and this is the conclusion that I've come to, and see if it makes sense to you. A fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I made, may they be purified by the mantra of Vajrasattva. Om Benzasato Samayamana Vlaivan Zasato Zanivajra Dedameva Zudukameva Zukameva Anurakmeva Zavasiti Me Brajasava Kama Sutra Me Kidam Shun Kurum Ha Bhagavan Savatata Benzamame Muka Benzababa Ma Samaya Sapa Ah Om Fe. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jujikalara Rama Chunjo Ruler Hong Jo Hong. May Paul and Lama protect Lama Sutra Malion during her surgery tomorrow. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Chunjo Kalarachimo Rama Wachadaja Chunjo Ruler Hong Jo Hong. Om Vajrapani Hari Agriva Garuda Hom Hom Fe. Hom Fe. Om Vajrapani Hari Agriva Garuda Hom Fe. Om Vajrapani Hari Agriva Garuda Hom Fe. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samanta Bhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and help for beings, all-powerful. Chen Rezig, Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara's end. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama's throne remain Vajra strong, and may he remain until we're all free in this world. Complex yogi poses as a simple monk. A supplication to Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears, elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. Practice the teachings. Just like you eat food, you don't just look at food. Looking at food's not enough. You got to eat it. Hearing the teaching isn't enough. You got to practice it. In the words of Jetsun Milarepa. And we heard from the most venerable Geshe Pema Dorje today. Thank you so much, everybody. Please change your minds because you'll be happier. And if you change your mind enough, you can come back and help me be happier. Take care.